We've reached a point, though, now where 6 pools comprise 90% of all the blocks that are created by the network. 4 of those pools are Chinese-based pools. All of them have either direct or indirect ties to Bitmain, meaning there's really only one decision maker behind them. The other 2 are Luxor and Foundry, which are US-based pools. But it essentially means that the choice of what transactions go into blocks right now is being made at between 3 and 6 organizations. That puts the network at a massive risk for censorship, because the power of being what's called a template creator. So a template is the mechanism by which the block is constructed. And you could think of it as the algorithm by which the transactions are chosen. So of the 200,000, which 4,000 am I going to pick? Well, logically, on the surface, it may seem like you'd always pick the most expensive ones. But what if you had your own transaction? Wouldn't you pick your own at no cost? Like, that's a logical example. Well, that's what they do, by the way. They typically have a provision that says we'll pick the most expensive ones. But if you were Bitmain and the Chinese government knocked on your door and said, hey, we've identified this following list of addresses as associated with people we don't want to be able to transact on the Bitcoin network, so don't ever include them, regardless of what the fee is. Or the US government could do the same thing to Foundry and Luxor. So that's a huge danger point. So this brings us to Ocean. About a year ago, actually a year and a half ago, I became associated with the crew at Ocean. Ocean was just in the process of reforming. It had been a pool called Elegius, which had run from 2011 to 2017 and disbanded, led originally by Luke Dasher and a guy named Jason Hughes. Well, they had decided to reform the company. Jack Dorsey had put in the original money to kind of get the thing back up and running. And they came to me and told me about their vision. And their vision was, we want to return mining to its original roots. And we don't want to pick the transactions. We want the miners to pick the transactions. They can still be part of a pool, meaning that they can work collectively to mine a block and share money, that's the main purpose of a pool, is to give miners who have a small amount of hash rate that would go long periods of time independently without winning a block, and have them work collectively at a size where you improve the odds of them winning blocks more frequently, and then they share those revenues. Well, I loved what they were saying, because I believe this issue of who controls block space is maybe the most important issue facing Bitcoin. It's the most important opportunity. It's also the area that causes me to lose the most sleep. So I wanted, as a miner, and we try to be very ethos-centric in what we do at Barefoot, I wanted to be able to be part of that. So I became the first miner to commit hash rate to them, which I did last summer. Then I became an investor and joined the board of directors there. Well, initially what we did was we brought up the pool in its original form, which meant we looked similar to the other companies in that we had a template. It was just another choice. But after a few weeks, what we did is we gave the individual miners their choice of 4, some of which were, by the way, philosophically opposed to our individual beliefs, which generally are very against spam and non-monetary uses of Bitcoin. But we gave the miners that choice because at the end of the day, we believe the miners are the guardians of the network, and they are somewhat like voters on the network. So they can pick whatever transactions they want. And when things like soft fork or hard fork activations come in, that's how they would express their vote. We wanted them to be able to do that individually. So anyway, we started out with 1, then we went to 4 after a few weeks. Now we just released something called Datum. What Datum is it's a return to the original vision I talked about. So now, again, Barefoot was the first company in the world to do this. We brought up a Datum server, which means we now are part of the ocean pool, but we create our own templates with the algorithm that we decide to choose which transactions we win in our block, and we've had actually massive acceptance. We've got something on the order of 65% of the ocean pool is now miners choosing their own template, and that's a wonderful thing, because in a world where censorship now starts getting forced upon the community, which in my mind is just a matter of time, we've created an infrastructure where at least some percentage of the hash rate, it'll be fundamentally impossible to force censorship upon them. So if there is somebody in China who's being oppressed and their transactions can't get through, it may take a few days, but they'll be able to do something and have somebody on their side that will include their transaction. So, it's really a fight to keep the network decentralized, to keep it censorship-free, to allow miners to have a voice again. Because I believe essentially all the miners today are mercenaries. They are not actually, you may think of, I won't call out names here, at least at this point today, but think of basically all the big public miners. Okay. Number one, they're not miners. Actually, I will say, one exception, we have some philosophical differences sometimes, but Marathon actually creates their own, they have their own, it's not really a pool, they solo mine. So they are expressing themselves properly, and I respect their right to do that, and I applaud them for doing that. Basically, all the other large miners who call themselves miners are not miners. They are mercenaries who are being paid by the pool and I said, abdicating all of their choice and their responsibility to the network, to the pool. And that's not good.
Mm-hmm. Is that because, do you say that because they're directing their hash power, their hash rate, without choosing their transactions? Is that sort of what you mean by not mining?
So what they do is company X, let's say they have 5 exahashes of power, or let's say 7 exahashes, roughly 1% of the network, and they connect to, let's say, to Foundry. Well, at the moment they connect to Foundry, what Foundry is essentially doing is saying, we're going to pay you what somebody mining at a 1% level should expect. You're giving us the use of your machine. Mm-hmm. You will not know actually what work we're giving you.
Okay.
By the way, it might not be Bitcoin.
Right.
It could be Bitcoin Cash. It could be Bitcoin SV. Maybe we'll talk about it later. I have a new project on auditable and verifiable random numbers. There's other things you can do with the machine. All they know is their machine is being used and Foundry is paying them for it. But they have no say in what happens. So they get paid in Bitcoin. It has the feel of being a Bitcoin miner, but they're not.
They could be being sanctioned and not even know it by China or the U.S. At some point, that will probably play out.
Yeah, well, Foundry could be.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe Foundry is at this moment, and there are several people. I'm not one of them, but I follow several people, and there are people that are constantly looking at the different pools to see if there is anybody trying to consistently exclude certain transactions and trying to be OFAC compliant. Actually, Marathon, on the negative side, I gave them a compliment. On the negative side, for a brief period of time, were actually trying to be OFAC compliant.
Yeah.
And the community just erupted at them, and they backed off. Now, they had done that voluntarily, but the problem with the public miners, I think in a large part, is they're captured in a lot of different ways. Now, I'm a private company. I'm a private miner. If they show up at my door and say, Bob, gun to your head, either start doing this or we're going to put a bullet in your head, I have a pretty hard decision to make. But they really have no decision to make. Like they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, and most of them are not very ethos driven anyway. So they'll say sure, and it really, and to a certain degree, I think they will go like, whew, like I'm happy. Why? Because now they have a certain risk. Okay, the risk is that they've processed transactions in violation of OFAC sanctions. And so, the government could, in theory, come to them now and say, hey, we're going to prosecute you because you were part of mining these blocks that had these things in the past. So if they came in and said, hey, you're going to be OFAC compliant, you're grandfathered, you're good about everything that happened before, their legal department and finance group would be ecstatic because they no longer have any risk or liability.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money, and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest Byte Federal ATM and turn your cash to coin. Byte Federal has over 1,200 locations around the country with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, bytefederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only US manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our US-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.